I thought I'd talk a bit about computer ideas, concrete ones, to try and get my sanity back after talking to Gerardo. I think something really bad did happen to him, and he's been really badly screwed over. But he's got all of these. His ideas for what to do are well, definitely verging on megalomaniacal. And just talking to him, listening to him for about an hour today, I started doing my head in. So I made my excuses, came up here. But just because he's got megalomaniacal plans doesn't mean that he doesn't have a serious grievance about what the police did to him on the con that the lawyers pulled. And as for my daughter, I don't know. I don't care. I really don't care. When I was a kid, because I didn't have enough money to buy a computer, I used to design them. Because in those days, I've said before, you used to get circuit diagrams with computers. So there were all these personal microcomputers around, like TRS-80 and ZX81 and ZX80 and, well, not the BBC, that was different, but for all these others, you could get, you got the full circuit diagram. It was published, and I don't know if it had a copyright, but it was pretty easy to get hold of photocopies of the circuits. And that's how I learned how to design digital logic. Unfortunately, I never learned how to actually implement it. I didn't learn enough electronics to know about decoupling, capacitance, and little basic things like that. But I enjoyed designing stuff. And after I started designing, and at some point when I was doing this bus program, what I call programmable bus logic, I called it that only a few years ago. I just thought it was the way shit worked. Because there are lots of examples of it. Things like the way all CRT character generator ROMs used to work, and things like that. Those are all basic building blocks that you can design. Those principles don't only apply to generating raster graphics, they apply to anything. So I started getting a glimpse of how you could design a microprocessor where you had instructions with certain bits set, how they could be used to transfer data from memory to registers and things like this. And I really, really enjoyed finding Ben Eater's videos. Those are just brilliant. He's great, that guy. Oh, if only I was a kid now, I'd be so happy. But once I got the ideas of this idea of bus logic, the problem that I had was that I couldn't find a commercially available bus plane that could handle what I wanted to do. S100 bus was the only kind of de facto standard that was around at the time, and it didn't have nearly enough pins on it. And I realized a few years ago that what I really needed to do was redesign the way bus planes and things were done, because that was a very restricted model. It was just the idea that you have a motherboard and a bus on it, and you put your expansion cards into the motherboard along the bus. That's what we ended up with IBM ISA bus standards. But if you looked at the transputer design and the idea of 4 external channels and things like that, you could come up with a much more interesting configuration where you maybe build, you have boards at all angles of a cube, and you clip cubes together and things, and you need to design the cooling into that. And I started thinking about cooling and how that works, and then I had another insight separately from that I had some very complicated ideas about cooling and how you could actually run liquid coolant through tubes that were plugged at the same time as you plugged the bus in. But the big insight I had when thinking about data centers and things was just realizing how much power was used to move the air around through the computers, because you go into a machine room and you're almost deafened by the fan noise, and it's because every single device has half a dozen fans in it, and they're all in this one room, and there's air conditioning running. And if you think how much power is going into these fan units, which are located right there, the fans themselves are generating heat. Those motors won't run unless they generate heat themselves. So you need to calculate, if you're going to build a data center, a huge cloud data center somewhere, some place like Bluffdale, where you're literally going to have acres of computer systems, you could really benefit by thinking it through. And you don't want the fans located within the system. You can use a flue instead. The idea of a flue is that the heat from the combustion process, or the thermodynamic waste, whatever it is what will move the air through. So if you have your machines stacked in flues, they will draw air in, and they could draw air in from underground tunnels dug into rock, and at night you could open vents to let cold air into the rock to cool it down. And during the day you'd shut those, and you would draw the warm air through well, you wouldn't need to shut them, would you? You'd just be drawing warm air through the cold rock all the time. No, you need to work out the thermodynamics, but you can put all sorts of things into this equation, like heat pumps and stuff like this. And then so I had those ideas at the same time as I realized that the advances in FPGAs, the density on FPGAs just shot up enormously in the last sort of 5-10 years. And you can now fit something like 128, a very rough calculation seems like you can fit something like 128 6502 processors onto a single Xilinx FPGA. And then later on, sometime in 2013, I think, 2014, I was thinking about the trouble with bus switching and programmable buses and CPU designs was that if the data was parallel, then you used a lot of components count in crossbar switch type applications where you're connecting parallel buses together, and it might be better to go to serial buses. So I was very happy when I afterwards discovered that somebody quite closely connected with the Raspberry Pi Foundation had done a design using these balanced serial AT, whatever they're called, it's serial hard disk connectors, which were very precisely balanced, and you could drive them at very, very high rates. And so I started thinking about how you could do computing using serial data flows, switching serial data flows, and then you could switch certain logic units into data flows, and you process arbitrary bit streams, and then you direct the bit streams through the processing, and it's pretty non-von Neumann. That would be fun to work on. And you could start at this kind of student level with FPGAs, low density FPGAs, and it would be a really fun course to run. But if any of my plans sound megalomaniacal, they weren't. They were just, I knew that if you get education right and you get a stimulating educational environment, pretty much everything else will sort itself out. And that's turned out to be a war since 2014. People trying to destroy education. So it's really simple. And then logic comes into it, because if you don't have a proper logic of possibility, your reasoning about the world, and especially the human world, just goes to pot. You start making basic assumptions about the nature of humanity, like we are greedy and power corrupts and things. You build them into your systems, and you very quickly cease being capable of reasoning about the world or solving any problem in it. And that's what people have tried to actively promulgate. And that kind of reasoning seemed to be inherent in these uncomputability results and things like that. It was all based on a bullshit notion of semantics. My foot's slipping off the rock that I tried to prop it on. So, just needed to write books about interesting things. My daughter has done everything to stop me doing that. Everything. Hell-bent on stopping me from having any kind of autonomy sufficient to have a voice. So instead of the lady Programmer's Guide to Standard ML, you have Standard ML for the working programmer. So have fun with it. What a fucking crap book. What an absolute load of fucking shit. And I actually bought a copy of it. I'm nervous now because I don't know how many, I don't know if there seems to be an arbitrary, YouTube can just arbitrarily stop me uploading videos now for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know what the limit is. There was nothing on it saying that there was a daily limit when I looked at the page. I don't know why they did that. And I know nobody watches the fucking videos anyway, but I tried communicating just by making notes on a phone and then leaving them there and assuming that the hackers would take them, and it really fucked my head. So I'm not doing that anymore. I want basic human rights. I haven't done anything wrong.